Hello and welcome back to Rainy Day Let's Play. I'm Solon, and this is the 16th part of Bioshock Infinite. I don't even know why I put part numbers in there. It's an infinite game. It goes on infinitely. So, lots of stuff's going to happen in our last episode. We talked about racism and the history of racism in the US. We also had a run-in with the time cops or something. Some interdimensional crazy traveling. Interdimension planetary. Some, Beastie Boy stuff. Anyway, today we are going to actually apply what we learned in the last episode, or what we talked about in the last episode, to society today, and how Bioshock, to what extent Bioshock kind of looks at that type of thing. So, to begin, racial discrimination today does not look like cute caricatures of people of color. It does not look like demonization of the qualities of another person. Demonization would be actually better. What it does look like is nothingness. In media, racial discrimination is the fact that I can count the number of people of color in leading roles on broadcast television on one hand. As Kerry Washington, Maggie Q, and the amazing Miss Mindy Kaling of the Mindy Project. Anyway, there's 3 of them total out of all 24 hours of broadcasting of all of these broadcast networks. Yeah. So, racism today is very simple, yet very subversive. And racism has become a system that starts at the federal level and trickles all the way down to the social systems, such as our daily social networks and media forms. This is known as systemic racism. Notice that I used the S word, system. Systems are what games are built on.
Do you hear anything?
And games can be made about this kind of racism. However, Bioshock is not that game, because its systems in no way actually reflect systemic racism.
Shrine. It's a figure of Comstock now.
So we're seeing that apparently changing dimensions and changing space and time may have much broader consequences than we could have imagined.
Mr. Lin? Chen Lin? Excuse me, Chen Lin?
Who are you? You speak up! Speak up! Can't hear you over all these machines! Very loud!
I'm Booker DeWitt.
Stand back! These machines very dangerous. Wait downstairs with Mrs. Lin.
Daisy Fitzroy sent us. We need to talk to you about getting some weapons.
Machines very dangerous. No place for stupid people. Want to lose pretty head?
Mr. Lin,
downstairs!
What is wrong with him?
Remember him dead in that cell? Maybe in some way he remembers that too.
So there's not really any clear explanation for what's going on, but space-time magic.
Excuse me, ma'am. I'm looking for Mrs. Lin.
I'm Mrs. Lin.
No, I
oh,
mean
snap!
A Chinese lady. She was.
Booker. This is Mrs.
Oh, thanks, Elizabeth. Make it look like it's not a big deal.
What's he got without his tools?
Well, your husband is a bit out of sorts.
If he could work again, maybe. If he could work, he'd...
Mrs. Lin.
Maybe this is a metaphor for the whitewashing that Hollywood does in media.
Police. They took them and locked them up in the impound in Shantytown.
Alright, back to the game. There's our goal. Going to the impound in Shantytown. Done.
Would having his tools back fix his mind?
Elizabeth asking questions. I don't know. Leave me alone. Okay, so how systemic racism works. The system works.
Lin had a bloody nose.
Seems to be in style.
The system works by using the law systems to brand people of color as felons. So despite that crime rates have lowered in America, incarceration rates over the last 30 years have quintupled. And America now has the highest incarceration rate in the world, dwarfing China and Russia, who have comparatively oppressive political regimes. How does that work? This is where we get our history from the last episode, the war on drugs. manipulates the powers of law to specifically imprison people of color. Federal funding in the war on drugs goes to law enforcement agencies who arrest the highest number of people possible. So we know this as gamification.
If you want to ask me.
What?
My finger.
Sorry, I didn't...
It's all right. It's as much a mystery to me as anyone else. Maybe Songbird knows, but he's not talking.
I'm sorry.
What for? I get to wear this stylish thimble to cover up my hideous deformity. I hear they're all the rage in Paris.
Wait, did you just bring this all up for a vanity check? By the way, my thimble is awesome. And you got one.
Go ahead.
So, we can easily understand the system of the war on drugs as gamification, because law enforcement agencies are federally funded by the government not to find the most amount of drugs, but literally the most amount of people that they can. They're not looking for, like, drug lords or kingpins or some kind of mysterious thing. They're just grabbing as many people off the street as they can, and that's business. That's not for any other reason than that. So, law enforcement in the US has been gamified in a way that pays cops to frisk and arrest as many people as possible. And who are they going to look for?
You hold on to this.
Whatever they consider the lowest hanging fruit. And that's going to be people of color. That's going to be minorities. That's going to be poor people. That's going to be, I mean, it is, I am racializing this, but it can also easily be classified, or sorry, class ed. Not classified, that's a verb. So, are you kind of getting how the game part of this works? 80% of police stops are minority groups, and 85% of those minority stops involve an intensive search. That's compared to 8% of white people being stopped. So despite that, the other statistic, whether you are white or black, the odds of you having or selling illegal drugs are almost identical. So there's no statistical backing for these kinds of searches. These statistics spin out in our media and our law to become heinous ethical biases and stereotypes without any real statistics.
You must think me some sort of freak. A girl who can bring dead men back to life. Whose only acquaintance is a giant bird creature. It must seem ridiculous.
Vanity check.
You just got dealt a bad hand.
I am not going back to that tower no matter what happens.
Also another elevator descending on a scene. Again.
Why? What did I do to them?
You frightened them.
Good.
Ugh. It's almost sad how many elevator scenes there are. However, we have descended on Shantytown, which is the idealized slums of the population.
You can't think of solutions to all your problems. To keep you chasing that almighty silver eagle so you can buy everything they're selling to keep you down, brothers. But Daisy Fitzroy says there's another way coming real soon.
Aw, like brother love.
These people are like this because of Fink? Maybe Daisy's right.
Now, this isn't a bad way to show
Not before she
poverty, but it is an
We're getting
idealized
guns
way,
and then the airship.
Back it up,
which
Shell.
may not necessarily represent the reality of what poverty looks like,
Straight for the police station.
especially if and when shooting starts happening. For whatever reason, anyone would want to bring guns into this situation. Oh, there you go. There's the obligatory need for...
Spare some coin, friend. Not all of us are gainfully employed down here, and a man's gotta eat.
And this is how we demonize based on class. Note, this is not an example of racism because they are white, or in this case, Irish. However, it is a much realer thing that this is an example of classism, which is definitely a huge thing in American society right today. Although a little bit out of our scope of today's episode. Maybe we'll talk about that another day. So we can we can start to understand these statistics because we are supposed to be colorblind. And the extent to what colorblindness exists in the US is that law itself cannot challenge the ethics of these human rights problems because it does not see people of color. Basically, there's this grave human rights problem happening in America right now as people of color are purposely being imprisoned and they are permanently branded as a felon. And once you are branded, you are legally discriminated against voting, housing, food stamps, government aid, health, business rights, employment, and family raising by the government. Every single time you go and turn in your job application, even if it is McDonald's, you have to check the box, I have been labeled a felon. Despite whatever your crime was. Even if there wasn't a crime to begin with, but you were originally labeled a felon. Which is, unfortunately, very, very common because of the business practices of it. Hey, we can pick up the guitar.
The circle be unbroken by and by and by is a better home awaiting in the sky, in the sky.
Aww, that was sweet. The privileged people, out of all the kindness of their rich hearts, gave fruit to the poor little kid. Now let's eat all of his
Hey,
oranges.
there's a lockpick over there.
But it's okay because they sang a song while doing it. Oh, the implications.
Deep underground, well, you see things from the bottom up. And down at the bottom of the city, I saw a fire burning. The fire's got heat aplenty, but it ain't got no mouth. Daisy. Now she got herself a mouth big enough for all the fires in Columbia.
You don't see things from the bottom up when you're poor in poverty. You see things from the bottom. You just see the bottom, that's it. Alright. You are way too busy with trying to stay alive when you're in poverty to be able to see anything else. That's kind of the cyclical nature of that, but once again, this is outside of the scope of this. So, you can really start to see that the end game of this game of racial segregation in a lot of ways is really bleak. Unless you are in the private prison industry, which trades on the New York Stock Exchange amazingly well. This is what Bioshock Infinite does not show. Bioshock Infinite makes it look like we, as in present day us, beat racism by othering the 1910s, which is a social tactic used to say that you are better than someone else in some kind of way. You other them and dehumanize them. Oh, that was way back then. It is totally different now. That invisibilizes the human rights problems that are based on race, that persist to this day. As this game continues from this point, the critique will get bleaker and bleaker. Racism is reduced to only being about violence and derogatory language.
There's a tire over there.
And then, by the end, it is completely overshadowed by the game saying, if we gave them power, they'd be just as brutal and racist as we are. They being both people of color and working class people. So we're gonna continue moving around this area and seeing what Bioshock Infinite believes to be the struggles of the lower class.
I don't understand why some people are treated like men and others like animals.
There's plenty of places down below where you'll find more of the same.
Like, at wounded knee.
Yeah, like a wounded knee.
So they are using historical places like Wounded Knee to relate struggles of what's essentially the supremacist nature of Americans, or at least Americans back then. And because of that abstraction, we really don't have any reason or need to apply it to our situations. And so in that way, it's all invisibilized, which is just a total shame. When, I mean, this idea of systemic racism, to bring it back to our last episode, is known as the new Jim Crow laws. Oh, I didn't even have a choice but to kill them. But apparently that's just how this part works. I'm still not totally sure how this whole possession stuff happens, but it's kind of hardcore and weird. So anyway, we have descended farther into Shantytown, and now our job is to kind of clear this area out so we can get to the next area, which it's not very clear. Right, we are getting the guns from the cops' place, as they have taken all of the weapons for their own. So the idea of systemic racism continues very much to this day, and there's a whole lot of reading and writing, some of which I'll have linked in the main description, but I am not a good source of that kind of thing, and there are people from those sources that are much better than anything that I can say. The only thing I can do is relate it to Bioshock and relate it to game critique and game analysis, which is somehow within my wheelhouse because, as I've said before, you can make games on systems. As Brenda Brathwaite, game designer, sorry, Brenda Romero now, I always do that. But as she has said in the past with the games that she makes, that you give me a system and I can make you a game on it. Because that's exactly the building blocks for games. So, it isn't uncalled for there to be games about and exploring systemic racism and what that means. We have games that explore the systems underneath what it means to be a queer person. And those are games like Dysphoria and Mayanichi and Lim. Especially, they use their own systems to do those kinds of things. There are also games that look at class and the problems of what it actually means to be in poverty, and that is Cart Life, which just won the Indie Game Foundation like best of or something. I'm not remembering the award it was exactly. I think it was the Game of the Year though. But Cart Life is an amazing game that everyone should play. Really beautiful way to look at how systems are a part of our everyday life. And so this isn't something that is completely foreign to people playing games. This isn't something completely foreign to anything that we're doing here, even though it is completely a non-issue within the realm of Bioshock Infinite. And for that, we all lose. And for that, it is not a stretch to say that race has becomes invisibilized in Bioshock in a lot of ways. And that in itself is racism. So, for the end of this critique, I would absolutely love to open the floor to anyone and everyone who has stuck along the last 20 minutes of this. Thank you so much for watching, and if you have any questions at all, just comment below, and we can open this up to everyone. Thank you so much.